Welcome to episode 8 of My Thoughts. So, today's episode, I don't know, actually I do know, why our society seems intent on pressuring a divide between two portions of the population, specifically black people and white people. There are more people of color in our country than just black people. There are more people of color who have been discriminated against and treated in ways that would make slavery seem like an improvement. And if you really want to understand more about that, I recommend reading and looking it up for yourselves. A quick version would be the Chinese immigrants brought over to work on the railroad for the opening of the West. They were point blank paid for, put on ships, brought to the West Coast, beaten, harassed, and shot with complete disregard. At least with black slaves in the eastern half of America, they were at least given medical treatment to keep them working. There is quite a fact a pennies on the dollar cost difference. To purchase a black slave took many dollars. To obtain another Chinese worker was pennies. They willingly got on ships to go to America from Asia. I'm sorry, it is stereotyped as them coming from China, Hong Kong, Shanghai. But in reality, they came from numerous places in Asia. And they were brought over willingly. They looked forward to this opportunity to go to a far distant land to make pennies to send home to their families. Because in China specifically, pennies were more valuable than dollars are right now. But our society, specifically being led by our political class, are intent on keeping us divided between blacks and whites because they are the two major categories of people in our community. Yeah, guess what? Asians and Hispanics both have greater financial flow, greater economic flow than both blacks and whites. But you're not going to find that because very little of it goes through stock markets and what we traditionally think of. But the people who have the biggest effect on the socio-political outcome of our country are blacks and whites. This week, there was an article put out regarding Coca-Cola Corporation's equal opportunity training, specifically titled, How to Be Less White. Someone said once, actually it's been said so many times that it's just kind of a cliche at the moment. If you want to determine if something is racist, change whatever category you are referring to any other category and see if it still works. If you change how to be less white to how to be less Asian, how to be less black, how to be less Hispanic, how to be less female, how to be less Middle Eastern, you will find that meets the definition of racist, sexist, patriarchal bullshit. These categories are be less oppressive. Okay, yeah, that goes right straight to the golden rule. Treat other people as you would like to be treated. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a bully. So for people who think, well, in America, we have, hold your hostages right there. Just hold your horses. Why does this argument have to be so ethnocentrically American? We want to take a look at inequality? Let's take a look at Japan right now. Specifically, the group of people known as Korean Japanese. These are people who, during the Korean War, their ancestors migrated to Japan to get out of the war in Korea. They were considered refugees. They were not citizens. They were not given an opportunity for citizenship. A Korean person marries a Japanese person, births and raises a child in Japan. That child is not a Japanese citizen. They have numerous derogatory comments for that type of individual. And they are not classified as a citizen, and they are not permitted to vote in national elections. That mixed ethnicity child marries another Japanese person, has a person who's more Japanese, born and raised, never leaving the island of Honshu. That's the main Japanese island. That child is also not considered Japanese, not a citizen, and not entitled to vote in the national election. And that is right now, 2021, Japan. Here's another one for oppressive, okay, marginalization. Another reason to look at how America is actually leading the way. Queen Victoria, the Queen of England, from 1820 to her death in 1901, Queen of England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and the Empress of India, Queen of the British Empire, upon which the sun never set, could not vote in elections in her own country. Catherine the Great, Tsarina of Russia, Queen of Russia, could not vote in her own country. But, that's the 1800s. Yeah, she could not vote in her country. She could not vote anywhere in Europe, North America, South America, Asia, Australia, Africa. But she was the queen of the country. Queen Victoria of most of the world could not vote in any of those continents either. I guess that just shows it's the patriarchy. But guess what? That's not the United States. We have been striving, leading the way on racial and ethnic equality. We're not the first country to try to do away with slavery, which still exists right now. Not in our country. Back to Coca-Cola's How to Be Less White. Be less arrogant. Okay, look, yeah, people should be less arrogant. Arrogance usually compensates for a lack of actual personality. Be less certain. Wait, be less certain? So, are you telling me not to be educated? Should and if this is for people who work at Coca-Cola making beverages, drinks that go in human bodies all around the world, wouldn't we want them to be certain about what's being put in those bottles? Be less defensive. Well, I guess I'm failing at that because I'm sure that anyone watching this will assume that I'm being defensive because, oh, wait, I have too much reflection of the light. So, yeah, I'm kind of light-skinned there. Yeah. My ethnic background is completely and utterly Western European. It's almost embarrassing the efforts that my ancestors had to go to ensure they also only married other people of completely Western European background. Yeah, that had to be a lot of work. Be more humble. Hey, cool. Yeah, be less arrogant, be more humble. Okay, that's a good thing. Be less ignorant. Okay, be less ignorant, but be less certain. So which is it? Be educated, be uneducated. Now, to say being educated doesn't mean, oh, go to school, just do your time. No, it means learn what you're talking about. In my case, I actually have studied this kind of crap for the majority of my life because I want to know how and why people act the way they do, primarily so they will not attack me. You know, earlier this week in one news article, there was a mention of how to know that you have white privilege. If you get stopped by a police officer and your first thought is not, oh my God, this is how I'm going to die, then you have white privilege. Well, yeah, 90% of the time that I get stopped by a cop, I am watching how close their hand is to their gun. Because I don't trust them to not shoot me. Listen. Okay, yeah. We all need to listen. Specifically, we need to listen to understand, not to respond. All too often, what people do in human society, regardless of where you're at, because of not just arrogance, but because of ego, superego, and people generally listen in order to respond, which is actually a way of defining being defensive. Listening to respond is a manner of being defensive. So I guess the person who wrote this didn't realize that how repetitive they were being. Break with apathy. Yeah, break with apathy. That's why I'm now making broadcasts. I'm not just sitting there quietly just taking it. I want the world to be a better place. I have nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews that I expect to be able to grow up and live and not be forced into servitude to the likes of some hostile socialists, which honestly an unhostile socialist is still less offensive than these leftist totalitarians that are currently trying to create so much chaos and conflict in our community. Because if they can keep us fighting each other, then we won't be paying attention to what they're doing, stealing all of our resources and forcing us into economic slavery. Break with white solidarity. This one I've just got to elaborate on a little bit more. How about American solidarity? Sure, we can go with that. Solidarity for being white? Okay. Anybody watching this can tell the color of my skin. Let me tell you a few things. White supremacists will seem like some of the nicest people that a white person's going to meet. You're not going to know that. You're not going to know that because you're just going to know that when you have problems, these other people are going to be like, oh, it's so hard for you. Oh, that's gotta be so difficult. Oh, the system's trying to keep you down. Yeah, it's actually the same kind of stuff that militant black activists say to black people, that Che Guevara talked to his people about. That, I always forget that fellow's name. Great guy, though. Hispanic fellow who fought for equal rights for migrant farm workers in California. Same kind of thing. The system is trying to keep you down. Then, eventually, they're like, hey, come over for a barbecue. You go over and find out everybody's wearing white robes. Yeah, I didn't have to get that far. I noticed the other things they were saying. Other things that they had. Little emblems on things. I don't give a flying fairy fart about somebody saying that they're 100% white. Why do you need to tell somebody that? Because you're probably a jerk who has no sense of self-importance in the first place. If you have no self-respect, then you look for things like that so that you can artificially inflate yourself, which goes back to that first concept of arrogance. Don't be arrogant. There are so many more important things that we have to deal with in our nation right now, that we have to deal with as humans. We have an immigration problem, not because there are 20 million people in the country illegally, because the majority of those people, allegedly, is estimated that approximately 60% of the estimated 20 million people in the country illegally came here legally and failed to leave at their designated time. Many of them have been here for decades. There are people who are still in this country illegally since the 1970s, even though President Reagan gave amnesty in the 1980s. But they didn't get the word because they were so busy hiding from the immigration officers. These people do need to be registered. Friggin' Joe Biden's immigration bill that he's putting through, some people are arguing, well, he would give amnesty to everybody, and that would encourage more people to come. Yes, it would. But more people are going to come anyway. The important part is that the people who are here are registered so that they can report crimes without fear of retaliation from law enforcement, and so that they can pay their fair share of income tax instead of having to secretly use somebody else's number and then they get divided, or one of my personal favorites, side hustling to get paid in cash so that nobody's reporting anything to anyone. I can't fault a person for that. However, if they've been residing here, then register them as residents. That way they can hold the responsible portions of the same responsibilities as other people residing. Reporting crimes, reporting fires, paying taxes. Some people want to argue that, oh, well, then they'd get welfare. Well, guess what? There's no federal welfare system. That cannot be managed at the federal level. And we'll save that for another time. But right now, the important thing is that we remember that we are all people. We are human beings. Skin color does not make you a better person or a worse person. Being told to be less white is as racist as being told that the water fountain is for white people only. And we all need to push back on that because everyone should be being treated with equality and fairness. Well, that does it for today. I'm out.